Today, I'm up over $130,000 day trading live, and here is the performance card via Tradecopia. A beautiful day across all my prop accounts, and today was a perfect example of what it means to stick to your system throughout any course of any period. If you guys recall back to a couple weeks ago, we had a period where we were in drawdown, and it sucked, right? Obviously, being in drawdown isn't fun. It's not something you'd like to do as a trader, but we stuck through our system and today, alone, not including yesterday, not including this week, not including last week, not including the week before, today alone mitigated almost, the entire drawdown period that we were in um completely. And this was the trade that caused it, right? We were up at peak, I believe, a 9.8R, but the trade realizes at a 7.2R, right? That's because you see me mention at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when I will close that trade. 4 p.m. candle open was about a 7.2R. But before we talk about the trade, let's talk about how we got here. Talk about my buys, talk about what precisely caused me to take this trade and make me over $130,000. Well, let's get into it. So, starting off coming into the morning, I ended up coming into the live at around 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Typically, through our schedule, we're live at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every single day, live trading. And what me specifically just ended up coming into the open, expecting a bit of chop just because of how productive we were overnight. Usually, historically, and what we've seen as of recent is every time we've seen an overnight session trade well or sequence happen, we see New York tend to usually slow down a bit. Well, that wasn't the instance for today. I did end up missing a good chunk of the morning pump, but however, price was very directional today, and we were able to capitalize on a very good trade. Now, through our 11 a.m. open or 11 a.m. session where we started trading live, this is the point in time right here, 11 a.m. For me, I was still very much so in the interest of higher price. I think bias is pretty clear here because with our three instances or three components when it comes to identifying bias through higher time frame, through overnight price session, and through the opening range move, every instance was extremely bullish. Higher time frame on the hourly time frame, on the 4 hour time frame, on the daily time frame, whatever you want to mark it, you see consistent engulfing candles towards the upside off our open through last night Asia. Coming into the London session and coming into New York, we traded bullish completely all the way through overnight price, and most importantly, through the New York opening range move, which is your open move into an overnight session high or low. We instantly pop into our London highs, and we see price immediately engulf past that. So if that's not the most bullish indication of price to come towards the upside, I don't know what is. Every higher time frame looked bullish. All sessions through overnight looked bullish, and our New York opening range move looked really bullish as well. So coming into the session here, right, not even having a draw level in mind, I was pretty much keen on upside because of how clear it was. Now, what we wanted to do and go ahead and do is mark out some levels. So on the hourly time frame, we zoomed out. We had a couple levels here, an internal high here, internal high here, internal high here as well. And what we ended up deciding to do was stay the course and play the sentiment towards trend. Now, I said this on live stream today. You could have the right bias. Bias could be A plus, but if your timing is not there, you will not catch a good trade. So although we popped on at 11 a.m. and although bias was A plus and very much so clear, what we wanted to do was remain patient. Because if you're not patient and you don't wait for your entry criteria, you could easily still get stopped out in conditions that are very clear for your bias. Let me say that again. You could have a long bias per se for today, and it could be A plus and as clear as it was today through our three components and identifying that. But if you don't have a clear entry model, a clear way of entering the market, you could have a very bad time trade and it could still invalidate your stop loss while still validating your long bias, right? So all we did here was precisely wait. And although we did see a bullish, open and we could have easily blindly took long here, we did not. We simply waited for the opportunity for us to capitalize on a good trade, and here it eventually came. This trade here, the two components, or the main component with this trade here was this. I used two 1 minute gaps to mark out two 1 minute bullish fair value gaps, which did happen to come back down here. It did happen to get violated. But what we then see price do is immediately come right back up, and we see price violate this 2 minute bearish inversion fair value gap pattern. So, Lanta, what do you mean? Well, as you guys know, these 2 1-minute gaps, they were initially bullish. Us coming down here and closing under means they violate them. So we do have a bearish sequence here, but then what do we see price do? We see price come right back up in a much more displacive way. We see price within 2 to 3 minutes come back up and violate these two 1-minute bearish inversion fair value gaps, and we see price come back up. And for me, that was equally as good as a rebalance in mind, because we ended up creating a higher low. We ended up seeing the 5-minute time frame rebalance, and we ended up seeing price come right back up. Draw instances were marked out. We had the internal highs 29,686, 29,749 were initial take profit targets, and you can see me mention that in here, right? Very clear, very easy to follow along. You see me mention the fact idea, potential, long and play, combining two 1-minute gaps. Idea is we drop higher into 29,749. Break even stops with a closure above high of day. So essentially, we wanted to go risk on through the closure in confirmation and go risk free once we saw a candle closure above these highs. A pretty tight high of day, or a pretty tight break even stop, but you guys have to remember you still want to be risk appropriate here. Although we took a very good entry, you want to make sure your risk is in check. And I think the high of day break even was clear, because in the case we saw price close over nicely above high of day and came back down into entry, the likelihood of us wanting to retrace down lower was there, right? So what I mean by that is, chat, this necessarily doesn't have to be the most bearish thing, right? If you were to see price come up here off entry, take out highs and come back down immediately, that's not necessarily me saying, yeah, I think we're going to see downside or reversal back down lower. That's me more so saying, let's take risk off, because in the case we do want to retrace lower, say past this relative low, we avoid the potential of getting stopped out and taking a loss, and having the potential in waiting for a deeper retrace before taking longs back up higher. So that was the instance for today. We eventually ended up confirming, anticipating our entry a bit early, where we ended up taking this trade at 11:37 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You see me mention I am long right at the closure, and we end up taking this trade, and it immediately goes. The very next candle, if you were on live, you had a perfect fill. Through our model entry, we see price immediately shoot back up, go break even with the next 1-minute candle, which was really nice to see. And we eventually see take profit 1 get hit in this London high. Then we ended up seeing price, kind of consolidate for a bit, where we then eventually met higher price, and we went all the way through. So from TP1 onwards, it was simply continuation. And the best way to manage your trade from TP1 onwards is to simply trail and trail effectively. If you guys don't know how I trail in the room and how I trail through my system, I always do 2 ways. I either do previous take profit levels or previous areas of interest that we go based off in the case we never see retracements. But fortunately for today, we do end up seeing retracements. Therefore, we use our second way, which is basing off the second most recent relative high or relative low for a bullish setup. So what I mean by that is, say for example, we come up here and we see price showcase, a new high right here. From this high, we trail our stops to the second most relative low, which this would be the most recent. This would be your most second recent. So the trailed stops here, and you can see me vividly mention that right here. Boom, 29,695. And then from there on out, as we created new highs, we just kept trailing and trailing and trailing, where we eventually held this trade all the way into the closure of New York, realizing this trade at a 7.2 R at the 4 p.m. Candle closure. So a beautiful day, a beautiful trade, and we happen to take NQ because NQ was the leading asset. Stop placement on this trade here was based off a 1-minute wick low. I thought stop on this trade here was pretty good, and we saw a good ROI off it. Today's markets were just completely pumping, and this is what happens, chat, when you just completely follow your system. And you see that today's trade alone wipes out the bulk, if not all, of your drawdown that you experienced through the period that we had in here. And that's what I keep on saying time and time again. Because although drawdown sucks, obviously it always sucks. You never want to lose money, right? You never want to come into the market, put in a lot of time, and lose money, obviously. But it happens, right? It happens through trading. What's most important is those periods of drawdown that you completely continue to follow your system, and the periods where price is good, you follow your system as well, day in and day out, and you see the return on investment on today alone. Not mentioning yesterday, not mentioning the 4-day win streak we're on, not mentioning the 3-week, are on pace pretty much. This week we're going to close out green regardless of anything. So this week, last week, the previous week before, we've been green all 3 weeks, and just absolutely cooking up, and you're seeing why. So a beautiful day overall. That being that, hopefully you guys enjoy this review. I'm going to catch you guys in the next one.